Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a special bonus episode of The Forest.
Bonus!
So it's been a little while since we've uploaded an episode of The Forest because, obviously, we finished the series. But this is an episode we've been wanting to record for a while, and it's taken us a while to do so because we've been doing a lot of research.
Yeah.
And also a lot of playing through bits of the game again as well, which you'll be able to see a lot of that footage in the background right now and throughout this video. I don't know how long this video is going to end up being. It depends how much we elaborate on all the stuff we've got written down here.
And how much we ramble, to be honest.
There's going to be a lot, really. But
Yeah.
we had, if you've watched the series and finished the series, you'll see at the end of it, we had like a good 10-15 minute talk after we'd actually finished playing the game, where we were sat in the menus just discussing what had happened and things like that. But because it had happened just after the game, and obviously we couldn't remember and go back and look at some of the things that happened, it wasn't really like a proper in detail discussion. So we've taken quite a few weeks to kind of look at all the stuff in the game, kind of do a lot of re-exploration, watch some videos, read some comments on Steam and on YouTube and things like that. So we've kind of come up with our own version of what we feel happened.
Yeah, and quite a lot of what we are saying is that there is facts that back up quite a lot of these statements, but there is also quite a lot of opinion in here.
Yeah.
And you have to sort of like take all of this as it's not 100% factual. There's no evidence to suggest this is exactly what happened, but there's evidence that would back up a vast majority of what we're about to say.
Yeah, and there's a ton of different interpretations as well, so this is like our own interpretation of it. And because the game had such an impact on both of us, we just really wanted to make this video to kind of share our own thoughts and experiences with it. And if there's anything that we've missed that you think's really significant, then by all means, please tell us in the comments below. We'd love to hear about your own theories and stuff as well.
We want to know that just as much as
exactly.
Else, yeah.
The beauty of this game, because there's a lot of it which is kind of just opinion and speculation, is that it just creates such a big discussion. Like, the reason it's taken us so long to record this is because we've been discussing so much of it and researching so much of it. So it's, you know, it's great to see discussions in the comments. But let's get on with this, I guess.
Yeah. So we know that the island is, well, we believe that this is a remote island, the size of which we are unsure. And most likely in the Northern Hemisphere, a lot of people in quite a lot of the theories that we were looking at suggested that it was in Canada.
Yeah, and a lot of people, because of a note later on in the orientation PowerPoint that you see in the facility says that peninsula was bought. A lot of people think that this is like part of a really big landmass like Canada, and it's just a peninsula of Canada. But due to a lot of the kind of, you know, the plane crash and the natives and cannibals living on here, we think it would have to be an isolated landmass, otherwise this couldn't continue.
The landmass could be big, it could be country size that we would specifically think of as a country, but
mostly
we
isolated.
do believe but we do think it is an island.
Yeah, also all the boats and stuff that are found on it, like it feels like people had to reach it by boat, and you wouldn't have to do that if it was connected to a big country like Canada. So yeah, so we think it's an island. And in terms of like start date, we're kind of going in this whole theory in terms of a big timeline. The earliest actual confirmed date we have is 1930 something, and that's just according to like it's a caving guide that we find, which has a date on it which says 1930 something. We can't read the last digit, I don't think. And the latest thing is 2000 and something, and again we can't read the last couple digits, so we're not entirely sure. So this spans over the course of at minimum 70 years confirmed. But
we're thinking over 100 years.
Yeah, the kind of story we're going into is well over 100 years. Would you like to take it away with? Oh no, it's me. Never mind, it's me. I'm gonna take it away with where this starts. So there's two possible starts to this whole thing, way back in time, way before the plane crash, way before the whole company is opening, the Sahara Company. And one of them is that the artifacts already pre-existed on this island. Now, the artifacts are quite complex in terms of how they're made, with the mechanisms with the metal doors. We think that the metal doors are connected to the artifacts and already existed when the artifacts did, because the ridges on the metal doors are the same as the pattern on at least the first artifact. You can't really see as well the second as much, and it's a completely different looking one.
It's the same kind of metal though.
Yeah. So, who knows how they got on the island. It could have been an alien race or a more intelligent race on Earth. It could have been magic. It could have been the devil himself. It kind of suggests like quite a dark purpose, because in order to open the doors to get to the artifact, you have to like put something on the pedestal, which a lot of the time we were putting skulls and stuff on them. It kind of feels like, you have to sacrifice something. You have to put something on it in order to get in there. So definitely some sort of negative kind of being or relation with the artifacts. The first theory is that the artifacts were on the island first, and then the natives arrived after. Maybe they arrived on a raft, maybe they didn't, but that's the first theory.
The second theory would be that the natives were on the island first. So they were there before the artifacts, and the artifacts appeared one day after, or they were built underground, and they were unknown to the natives, or they appeared via something along the lines of an alien race or something that we don't know of. Yeah. So obviously the two theories: artifacts first, natives after, or natives first, artifacts after.
And we don't really know when this occurred. We kind of think it happened decades before the next people ended up on the island, or decades before all of this madness happened. We're going to talk about the second people to arrive on the island in a little bit, but I think we can agree that the progression in which the artifact affects people is very slow because of Sahara having been set up on the island for a while, and the scientists.
I think later on it will become more apparent as to why we believe that it's a very slow progression of the artifacts affecting people on the island.
Yeah. But regardless of artifact first or native first, they're both coexisting on the island, and eventually, after a while, after maybe decades, or maybe it's just a few years, the artifacts begin to corrupt the natives, and they don't mutate them. This is kind of quite important. They don't mutate them. They don't turn them into the Virginia monster or the Armsy monster or anything like that, but they do turn them savage, their skin changing color, them becoming a lot more aggressive towards people and cannibalistic. So they're affecting their minds and they're affecting how they act, until you end up with an island which has savage cannibals on it and these artifacts. And now there's like several different groups that kind of arrive on the island, and we're going to try and go through them in the order we think that they're arriving on.
So there obviously could be different people that arrived before this, but the earliest confirmed date that we have of other people arriving on this island is some spelunkers that arrived in 1930 something. Now we say 1930 something because as with the rest of the dates, we can see 1930, but we can't see the final digit. And it's seen on a cover of a magazine, a practical caver magazine,
and
which
they
we
could have
found
had
in
this
the caves
from an earlier date and have turned up the island a decade or two later.
But we've got to go on the assumption that that
they put the date on it for a reason.
Close. Yeah, the date's on it for a reason. They set up canvas tents, and they're only found near the caves.
Yeah, there's like a couple different types of tents, and there's a specific canvas type which seems a little bit more adventure-y, spelunky. Yeah, and they're only really found in and near the cave entrances.
It's like they set it up as a group as such, not like everyone's sleeping in separate tents. It's like it's a group of people.
Exactly.
And they were killed by the cannibals, all cave accidents. We don't think any of them, or there's no evidence that would suggest that any of them survived or turned cannibalistic. We think that they arrived, the natives were already cannibalistic, and they killed them, or through cave accidents they died.
And the world just wouldn't know what happened to them. Maybe they didn't tell people where they went, or maybe they were just never found and there's never any evidence that they were ever there.
And obviously through the time of us going through caves, we find various helmets, we find the climbing axes, we find all of the different lighting, all of the different tents outside of the caves. There's all of the evidence of the spelunkers being there, but no evidence of the spelunkers leaving and taking their stuff. They arrived and they didn't leave.
The next kind of most likely, at least in terms of being a confirmed date thing to arrive, would be the yacht. Now the yacht, if you guys have watched the series, you'll see quite early on that we come across, it might even been like one of the first episodes, we come across the yacht and we used that as a safe haven from the cannibals at multiple points.
The yacht was our favorite place.
And there's a lot of different things relating to the yacht, and one of them is that there's a Polaroid that's dated 1982, I believe. There's like a boating guide on the yacht as well, which is dated in the 1980s. It might be 1984, I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like a pretty recent boating magazine. So it's safe to say that the yacht arrived in the 1980s at some point. And we believe, which I don't think I've ever seen talked about anywhere, so this is complete speculation on us, but we believe that the yacht might have belonged to the Crosses. So the Crosses, for those of you who can't remember, the Crosses were, Matthew Cross was probably one of the high up people in the Sahara Company. Megan Cross is the little girl at the end, and Jessica Cross is his wife. So whether they were planning on going to this island or whether they were just mooring up for the night, they were kind of in a sheltered part of the island, so it could have just been to stop by for the night. Maybe they see signs of life and they see the cannibals and they investigate, something hinting towards the artifacts. We don't really know. It's not really important how they find the artifacts, I don't think. The important thing is that they discover the artifacts, because without knowing the artifacts exist, there's no reason for them to want to set a company up, because why else would you set up a company on a remote island? One of the things which I guess we should address this before we move on. One of the things that a couple people have kind of identified is that there's a milk carton on the yacht, which shows there's a missing child in it, and some people think that might be to do with the experiments on the children with the company, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But we think it might be something which actually just links to give the idea for the company. So yeah. Yeah,
and obviously at this point the company we believe is to be set up. After investigating what the artifacts do, or specifically the artifact that is low down underground, the one that we find first, it's the original aim to use this artifact is lengthening life, not reincarnation, because we think that is sort of found out about later on.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's by observing the natives, the cannibals on the island, and maybe they've been there for a while and they're like, look how strong they are, you know, how durable they are.
Yeah, and they discover reincarnation properties through obviously more testing, and they maybe use the natives as live subjects, and yeah, this is where they start the testing process of it.
And maybe the milk carton links to this, because we're thinking maybe seeing the missing kid on the milk carton gave Matthew Cross or other scientists the idea that they could use this to get money from parents whose children have died, and you know, this is a way of using natives to reincarnate their children, and that's gonna be big dollar. big
dollar.
However, this kind of goes a little bit wrong. So another theory about the children going missing, and we're going to talk about this film in a little bit. I guess these points will kind of link together, so I'll kind of group them all up. So this is something we found not on camera during the series. This is something we found after we recorded the series. In one of the cave, and you'll probably see footage of it in a little bit, or at least pictures of it in front of you now, but we went into a cave where there were boxes and boxes of videos found, and the videos were for a film called Lost Children of the Peninsula. And if you look at the video, the peninsula on the video matches up, the silhouette of it matches up to the exact shape of the peninsula that we're on now. If you look at the overviewer map on something like, you know, the Forest Wiki, then you can see it matches up perfectly. So this film is definitely about this island. Now, Lost Children's kind of interesting, and that kind of confused us a bit at first, because we're thinking, okay, so these parents are willingly wanting to bring their kids back to life. Why would they report them as lost if they know where their children are?
And this sort of like throws a lot of our theory into the confirmation that it is speculation and there's no sort of 100% truth behind it.
Yeah, and something which I thought could have been a possibility is that the children, you know, they were brought back to life, they were kept under observation for maybe a couple of weeks, and then they were sent back home. You know, okay, they're fine, they're alive, they don't seem to be acting funny, you know, they're definitely living. Go home, parents, go back to your, you know, your lives.
Your normal lives.
Your normal lives. But, you know, being a company which is kind of doing pretty crazy stuff, Sahara probably would have wanted to keep the children under surveillance in terms of maybe just keeping an eye on them in society. And then the children would have started to turn, as we know know, these children have been turning. We can see across the facility various examples and, you know, turning into things like the Virginias and the Armsies and things like that. So maybe Sahara saw that the children were beginning to turn, and not wanting to get the blame for it or being revealed as a company, they may have kidnapped the children and brought them back to the island, you know, and when the parents were asking if they were suspicious, they would have just denied it.
And this, in some instances, this could link into the missing children on the milk carton thing, and that could take it away from earlier on in the story, but it's not really something to focus on too much. Yeah,
and that's why this documentary would have been made with the lost children of the peninsula. Maybe the parents are suspicious, but they don't really have any actual proof that that's where their children are. Now, also, we found like a cloning book in the facility, so we're thinking that's how maybe there are multiple Virginias and multiple Armsies, and was the cow guy, I can't remember what his name is, but you know, those specific mutants, because if we look on the information on like the cork boards and stuff, we can see that they're specific, and like, you know, on the orientation slideshow as well, those particular mutants like Virginia were linked to a specific kid that transformed into that specific monster. So why are there multiple of them? But there's a cloning book,
and this could be anything from like bigger and higher doses, like dosages of whatever they use, or like there's various different things like length of treatment and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think they probably cloned them instead of just having multiple different kids turning into the same kind of mutant. I don't think they would have turned into the same kind of mutant. They would have turned into something different. So
exactly.
I think that's why they're cloned. So in terms of the video, the peninsula was bought. If you look at the earnings report on the orientation slideshow, there's a big dip in profits, and that's most likely when the peninsula that they're on was bought. That's 2/3 into the earnings report, and we don't know whether this earnings report is, you know, over the course of a year or over the course of the whole company or not. But it's, you know, even if it's just a year, that's the last third of a year, which is quite significantly into a year before actually buying the peninsula. And they could have just decided, okay, we got to buy it so we can cover ourselves better. But this could link to one of the theories we have with the film.
Yeah, so obviously, to do with the film, we found these boxes of just loads of the films, which is the Lost Children of the Peninsula. There's two theories we have. There's one that a film team snuck on, trespassing on the peninsula, and that is why it was bought.
Yeah, we can see film equipment all over the peninsula, and there's also a different type of tent from the canvas tents, which are more modern, which could have belonged to them too.
So that could then link to that, and we think if that was the case, that they were chased off by the cannibals. It's almost as if the people running Sahara found that they were trying to sort of showcase what they were actually doing there, and they then tried to cover it up by boxing up all of the videos that they could, obviously when this film was made, and they tried to let the cannibals loose on any of them on the island. Or the company filmed it themselves, so Sahara filmed it themselves and tried to throw the general public off the scent of they're bringing their kids back and everything like that, and saying that they investigated it themselves, sort of thing, and that obviously explains the large amount of videos and possibly why the film equipment's been left.
Yeah, they're just like, whatever, it's our own film equipment.
Yeah, so there's two possibilities to that. Obviously, both of them could be wrong as well, but they're the two more likely possibilities that we've come to a conclusion about.
Yeah. So while all this drama's going on, the facility's kind of been on the island for quite a while, and the person who's been exposed to the artifact the longest, obviously, would be the person who, this kind of also backs up the yacht theory, the person who maybe came on the island and discovered it first, because he's been exposed to it the longest, and this is Matthew Cross. So we think that, you know, he may have become corrupted. Maybe he became, you know, not corrupted to the extent of being cannibalistic, but just acting a bit funny, acting a bit weirder or off. Maybe he was studying the cannibals and, you know, seeing, okay, there's all these paintings on the walls of the cave of this depicting this red man, so maybe that's why he started painting himself red, so he could get close to the cannibals, so he could observe them and things like that. You know, again, maybe his weird behavior was starting to cause family problems, because we have different evidence of different documents with family problems, and in June of some year in the 2000s, the family go to court, Jessica and Matthew go to court, and there's a restraining order issued against Matthew eventually, and we think maybe at this point Jessica leaves the company with Megan, because if you have a restraining order with someone, you wouldn't want to work in the same company as them. And
yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose of the restraining order.
Yeah, and Matthew feels like he's probably a lot more tied to this company than Jessica was.
Because, yeah, we feel he's higher up in the company.
Yeah, and at some point during this, whether it's at this point when the restraining order's been issued, or whether it's a little bit later after another big incident, which we'll talk about in a second, Matthew requests a school photo from Jessica, and she gives him the school photo but asks to not be contacted by him again.
Now, we're unsure whether that school photo was before the incident that we're about to say, and that was that Megan was murdered on September 12th. Now, the interesting thing about these dates and these dates alone is that on all of the dates given on any magazine or anything else that you'll see, any emails or anything like that within the game, the only ones to have specific days are the ones that are linked to the restraining order, when they went to court, the date of the murder. So we're thinking that all of this happened within the same year.
Yeah.
So September 12th, Megan is murdered. A few months later by Matthew. We're probably presuming, maybe, most likely. There is a autopsy report, which is very weird because it says the murder was
it's like manner
violent.
of murder, violent. It's like
violent murder.
That's very well filled
So
out.
did this happen at home? We think so, because obviously a restraining order was put on. So we think possibly Megan and Jessica did go back home off the island.
Yeah.
And since we've actually come to record this, we found a new note. One of the newer things we've found is a note in one of the caves, which we're not entirely sure where it is, but there is a note that says, "She's not dead, she is sleeping," which is interesting because that could, obviously, you would think that was written by Matthew, and obviously in terms of thinking that he can bring her back to life. And obviously then you would think that he knows that he can bring down a plane, and they discover that the new artifact can bring down a plane, and this is obviously in the year of 20 something, so this is we're thinking in the same year. Previously using cannibals, Matthew Cross wants to use the passengers, so this is where he thinks if he can bring down a plane, he can use a passenger, use a live subject to bring Megan back to life.
Yeah. And one of the things with this against using the natives is that the natives are already cannibalistic, so maybe the reason why it was failing with the children is because they're using live cannibals, whereas using regular humans might have made it more successful.
And this is where Matthew gets fired, because the company disagrees, that saying you can't take down a plane, that's just stupid, like this is not something
they'll find us.
Yeah, this is not something they can get away with. And this is at the point where he gets fired and he gets asked to hand his pass in and has to leave the company.
Now, I just remembered something, and I just had to double check it while you were speaking then, which actually gives more evidence about the school photo being before Megan's death. Now, we see there's an email which is just from Jessica with her school photo being like, here it is, please don't contact me again. There's emails in another part of the facility that has a reply from Matthew to Jessica with Megan's school photo attached to his email saying, "If you file for a divorce, you will regret it, Matt." And it's got Megan's school photo attached to that email. So that makes me think that this is the point before they get the restraining order and the separation. And that's when he's asking for the school photo. Maybe things have been rocky for a while, and that's why he hasn't seen.
And that could be the final bit of evidence to get the restraining order.
Yeah, and that also is what makes me think that he is the one who murdered Megan, because he said you'll regret it, and he's attached her school photo as though like she's the one who's gonna, be in danger.
And then obviously we think that the yacht that is on the island, whether it was there before, well, we think it was there. We're fairly certain it was there before Matthew Cross and the company. But then obviously they knew about this yacht because they're on the island, and they would have scouted and known the island itself. Now Matthew uses this boat to get to bring Megan's body to the island, possibly with Jessica. There is a body on the boat, on the yacht itself. And to sneak onto the island, he would disguise himself as the Red Cannibal, as he's done previously, and we obviously know this from all of the cave paintings that we see, and the fact that when we in the game paint ourselves red, the cannibals worship us.
They sing to us a beautiful
they
song.
sing to us, and they don't attack us.
Yeah.
So this would be a way that he could move around the island safely. This is a way that he could bring Jessica back.
Yeah. Bring Megan back.
He
doesn't care about his wife.
But obviously Jessica being on the boat, it could be Jessica. We think it could be, but there's no evidence yes or no to that.
Yeah.
But.
So he's left Megan on the boat and he's snuck into the lab. So this is where it gets interesting, because when we come across the lab, it's broken to pieces. There's chaos, there's cannibals in there, there's loads of dead bodies in there, but it seems to have happened really recently because there's still electricity in the lab. There's, everything looks quite fresh. Nothing looks like overgrown or degraded. It looks pretty recent when all this happened. So what we think happened was, this is the first time I don't think the second artifact's been used until this point, because it's such a powerful thing, and they might have done tests, but they examining what signals it was giving or whatever, but I don't think they've actually tested it. And a lot of people have suggested planes have come down before our plane, but there's no other signs of wreckage or anything like that. There's a lot of tennis stuff, but that's definitely from our plane, because I'm pretty the devs have confirmed that the tennis players were on the plane with us, and there's just no other signs of there being
there would be signs. There's signs of everything else that's happened, whether it be shipping containers that have crashed, whether it be the yacht, whether it be spelunkers. There's no evidence of any other plane. There would be evidence.
Yeah, indeed. So he sneaks into the lab and he activates that second artifact when he knows a plane is coming. Maybe he's on the island for a little bit just scouting it out, but he activates that second artifact, and not only does that artifact bring down our plane right to the beginning of the game, as we well know, but we think that the artifact also sent the lab into complete chaos. It's an electromagnetic pulse. It would affect their equipment. Their equipment used to monitor these cannibals, to keep them in their rooms, all of their security equipment, all of the door locks, everything. Yeah, exactly. So this is how the mutants, the big mutants like Virginia and Armsy and stuff, escape onto the island. The natives could already be wandering the island, or maybe they took the natives in after a while and then they escape again with this. But either way, it releases all of the cannibals, all of the mutants. They start killing the scientists. It's all chaos. We can see bodies of scientists piled up in the lab. We can see bodies of scientists piled up in the caves. It sends it into utter chaos, and that's how the lab looks so broken down. And things like the orientation slideshow still being on, they were in the middle of it. There's still lunch out in the cafeteria. They were in the middle of stuff when this happened.
And this is where we started. After all of this is evidence we've gathered up to this point, that is a timeline of us starting this game. At this point, this is where we start. The plane crashes, and Matthew Cross, as we see, this is the person, the red cannibal that takes Timmy at the very start of the game. He has a lack of genitals, so maybe he's already turned. And obviously he's been on the island for a long time, so that's a very strong possibility. He then brings Timmy to the lab, which is obviously where we eventually find him. And we're thinking maybe he uses the yacht to, obviously this is where he stored Megan, so he can vice versa. He could take Timmy to the lab. He could then go back and get Megan, because that's where he's been keeping Megan. He sacrifices Timmy at this point.
We should just mention, we didn't experience this cutscene, but you can experience it in the game, where you see the red man. Basically, if you start a game and you go straight to the beach with the yacht, and you look at it from a certain angle, you enter the beach from a certain angle, you can see the red cannibal enter that sailboat. You don't see if you go into that sailboat immediately after, you don't see him, but you see him enter it, so you know that he interacts
it's from the cliffside or the open beach area. If you walk onto the beach where the yacht is, so when you start the game, if you hay-rail it straight to the yacht, there's a strong possibility.
I've seen it. I started a game and I tried it and I saw it.
There is a strong possibility that you'll see a red cannibal, and obviously you've just started the game, so you're going to think it's the same red cannibal that just took your kid, go into this yacht. And at this point, this is obviously through this red cannibal moving around the island, taking Timmy, taking Megan.
Yeah.
He then sacrifices Timmy through the through the first artifact.
Yeah.
To bring Megan back to life.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we know that people turn after they've been brought back to life.
Mm-hmm.
We know the cannibals like turn.
Yeah.
This is obviously, like we were saying, how possibly the kids got brought back to the island, in the theory that we're sort of going with. He then tells Megan how he did it while she was okay. She turns fast, we think,
because of a high dose. He was desperate, maybe.
Yeah, desperate, wanting to do it quick, wanting to try and leave relatively quickly because there's a lot of chaos. Yeah, and there's a lot of chaos on the island because the plane's just crashed. He doesn't know how many people have actually survived and not.
Yeah.
And then he gets killed with crayons by Megan. And this is where obviously Megan then at that point, she wanders around the facility, and we find her later on in the boss room. We find her, we kill her, but as a dead specimen, she is not compatible with Timmy once we obviously have found Timmy later on.
Yeah, indeed. And this is where we discover the second artifact, and we're able to go up there, and we realize it could bring down another plane, which is not a good idea, and we shout a lot at him, but he does it anyway. And so we bring down another plane using the second artifact, and we take a live victim from it. It doesn't matter who, it doesn't matter what age, we take a live victim from it because that's what we need, and we use it to bring Timmy back to life. And we know this because we see Timmy at the end of the game, who is alive, at least for the first part of that scene.
Yes.
And then, obviously, it depends a little bit on how we're rescued. We could be rescued either by being found on this island. Maybe when the second plane's brought down, they're like, oh my gosh, this is really suspicious, we've got to check this out. Or maybe, we boat off the island and make it back to civilization.
There's a lot of this that is up for speculation because it's literally, we see the plane crash, we then skip 1 year later.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of this that is up to the imagination. There could be more added to this ending later on.
Exactly.
But we don't know yet.
Yeah, and who knows how we got off the island. It doesn't really matter so much, but most likely we probably remove the body from the artifact as well, because then obviously if they're like, oh my gosh, he survived on this island, they're going to be investigating this island after seeing all that happened, and if they see a body in the artifact, they're going to start asking questions, and you could be like, oh, it was Matthew Cross, but still it's a bit, they could recognize, okay, that's a passenger from the plane that crashed when you were already on the island for a while. How did they get in there? So you'd probably remove the body and pretend it died with all the other passengers that died in the plane crash and things like that,
or throw it into one of the many endless cave holes or something.
Pretty much.
Never to be found again.
It doesn't really matter how many of the crew survived and how many died. The point is that you're rescued. Big old famous, fame hits you. You go get a book. You're on a show and it's all going well. Chop some logs for fun, and then Timmy turns, which you saw the twitching. You kind of guessed towards the end. Maybe you used a lesser dose for Timmy, which is why it takes him so long to turn as opposed to Megan. Or it could be a case of the fact that Megan would have been dead a while, probably. If they found out that it could take down a plane in December and she died in September, that's a good few months after being dead. She's going to stink quite a lot. Whereas Timmy looks really freshly killed. His body is isn't decayed in the slightest, and the blood looks pretty red and shiny, which it may just be the extent of the graphics which this game currently has, but he doesn't look long dead by any means. And Megan, we could see her footprints leading from her dad into that room. It's not like she's wandered everywhere else since then. She's gone, in one set path. And that's pretty much the general theory for what we think happened leading up to this event. Now there's tons of other things. There's probably there'll be things that are in caves which we haven't discussed. There's things which I haven't actually mentioned in this document. I completely forgot to mention it. There's things we find lawyers in the caves with all the fortune cookie fortunes, and there's a lawyer scale things painted with red pen onto their documents, and we can find their heads severed on there and things like that. So whether they were lawyers after the company or whether they were lawyers after the divorce between Matthew Cross and Jessica Cross, who knows? But that's
there's plenty of theories for that. There's a couple of points that we had, but we had to sort of leave out because we couldn't date them. We couldn't find a way to fit them into this timeline that we created.
And they don't specifically link either to the actual core story.
No, but it's just something else that needs more clarification, whether it be through more content or maybe it's something that will always be left to speculation, that the devs don't really want us to know much about. The first of the 2 points is the unclear / charred bodies around this huge circular room,
and all over the island, to be honest.
Yeah, but there's like one specifically later on that we find that there is drastically a mass amount, like dozens upon dozens of bodies, and they all seem to be charred in place, like they're looking at something, or they're looking away from something, they're trying to protect someone, or it's as if like something fast and quick killed them.
There's also the bit where there's the painting of the first artifact on the wall, and there's bodies, like there's crosses and Bibles, and there's bodies reaching towards it, like mid-pose. So again, it's like a scene from Pompeii. It's like they were suddenly killed.
Yeah.
And we don't really know how.
Exactly, and that's something we just can't work into the timeline at all, because there's nothing to date that, there's nothing to link that to any of the other things that we know of that's happened.
Yeah, like it could have been the electromagnetic pulse, but then, because that would have swept over the whole island, but then would that not have done the same thing when we brought down the plane, and when when the other guy brought down the plane, like what when Matthew Cross brought down the plane, why isn't he like a charred body? Like it doesn't, we don't understand completely why. Maybe it happened before the lab got here, I guess, but then again, we don't know what triggered it, so it's a bit of a mystery. If you guys have any interesting theories on that, we'd love to hear them, because we're not entirely sure. Our other point was about some other people potentially who arrived on the island, and again, they're not really massively relevant, and we're not 100% sure when this happened, but we're thinking there must have been some more people who maybe arrived on the island, because there's a lot of like rowboats around and a lot of like life preservers. There's a big anchor on the shore, so maybe there was some sort of shipwreck at some point. I'm thinking like Titanic era, like I'm thinking that kind of era, just judging by the cases, judging by the rowboats and things like that. There's like a ton of Bibles everywhere, all over the island, and the Bibles don't like match up with anyone else, like with the film crew, with the scientists, with the spelunkers. Like there's so many Bibles, and
there wouldn't be that, you just wouldn't take that many
and stuff as well. There's lots of sailboats, there's like little, again with those bodies reaching towards the painting of the artifacts on the wall, like there's like colonies kind of living in the cave, like I don't know, maybe they were cave dweller colonies or something, I don't know, but with the rowboats and the cases that are like a little bit older, like more kind of leather kind of cases, so not the shiny new cases that we get out of our plane, but when you crack open some of these cases, they have things like cloth in them, like clothes and stuff, so it doesn't really feel like they belong to the film crew either, and they don't really fit in, so it feels like there must have been maybe a ship with people that arrived on the shore at some point. It would also add to the body count, because there's such a huge body count that it feels like there's too much for just some spelunkers and some film crew people and like a science lab. As big as the science lab was, it doesn't really feel like there's still enough to account for the sheer number of bodies, so
that's like a couple of the points that we just can't seem to work into the storyline or the timeline that we've sort of created.
Another point, which is something which we only discovered in the game fairly recently, but you could craft a gun in it by finding old gun pieces, and I think it's described as like an old gun, like old gun pieces, and a gun feels like something you'd expect colonists to have. You wouldn't have a film crew with a gun, you wouldn't have spelunkers with a gun, really, or scientists, so that's another thing which kind of hint towards more people living on the island at one point.
Again, this could be something that they wanted to hint at now in the game, so people can start speculating that they are going to add more evidence towards, or more things into the game later on that would link or write their story of how they got onto this island more into it. But at the minute, it's just speculation.
Indeed. And I think those are the two main points that we had, which didn't really fit in. I mean, there's the thing, this game, I still can't believe, it boggles my mind that it's an alpha, because there's so much to it. Like, we haven't even talked about the Timmy paintings, or like, there's like,
there is a lot
parts, like
there was a lot that we focused mainly, especially with this timeline, on the stuff that got us to the point where we crashed. when we crashed, that's where our sort of story began.
Yeah.
And we sort of summed all of that up within about 2 to 3 minutes of us crashing and us saving Timmy.
Indeed.
But within that, we found lots of evidence that just backs up, really, really subtly backs up certain points of this timeline.
Yeah.
And and again, this is in alpha. This is something that is by no means complete or finished in terms of the story, in terms of how in depth it is.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That ended up being a lot longer than I thought it would be. But hopefully this is interesting to you guys. I know it was really interesting for us to like research all this stuff and go back through the game again and replay lots of things. And again, there'll be lots of stuff we've missed. And if you guys want to hear our thoughts on it, then just like mention, hey, what about this? What about that in the comments below.
And if there is, and as Penny just said, if there is anything that you guys, if you've played it or you've watched the series sort of in quite a bit of detail that you maybe disagree on, maybe think that that's a little bit of bullshit, that could be something that is not 100% accurate or something that you wouldn't be able to get on board with, let us know, because a lot of this is speculation and is our theory of this, and not quite a lot of it. A vast majority of it could be debunked with future updates. So
indeed. And that's probably most likely the last episode in this series. We might derp around and stream some more, or maybe if there's a huge thing added, we might do like a video or two.
I'm sure in the future, if there is, because there is going to be lots of content. Yeah, there is going to be lots of content. I think maybe it would return in stream form, and then possibly through some montagey episodes of those derpy stream shenanigans. But as for this series goes, this is a bonus episode. Hopefully you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and we're going to be moving on to bigger and better things. We're going to be back with another series, and it's going to be it's going to be
dreadful, to be honest. It's going to be a bad time.
I was going to say it's going to be great, but okay.
Okay.
That's awkward. Okay.
Well, we didn't. We didn't agree on that before.
No,
damn, this is a bit awkward now.
Anyway, we're going to be back with... Are we going to announce what the series is? Are we going to say which one?
Let's announce it. To anyone that is stuck with this series, 66 episodes, now 67 with this bonus episode. We're going to be playing Habbo Hotel. No, we're going to be playing... we're going to be playing Saints Row the Third.
Yeah, we're very excited. We both played this game before, I think, or at least most of it. But not together and not in years for either of us. So it's going to be a very different feel from The Forest, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you guys, if you guys enjoyed this series, then you're going to love Saints Row just as much. And we're going to have a great time
One of the beauties of this was the fact that we just got to derp around a lot.
And oh boy, is Saints Row going to be a lot of derping.
Saints Row is just 100% that. So
I'm so
hopefully
excited.
You guys are looking forward to that, and that will come in the next few weeks, maybe.
Yeah,
possibly.
Indeed. This might take a while to edit, so we'll see.
Yeah, so we'll keep you updated. Follow us on Twitter and stuff.
Honestly, it probably won't be that long after this comes out, because this will take a while to edit. So
yeah, ask us in the comments of our videos now. If you are still watching this, ask us in the comments. Yeah, ask us in the comments.
If you've watched this to the end, then add to your comment whatever you post. Add Edson sucks.
Is the best.
Oh. Okay.
Oh god.
Oh no. Edson likes pink panties.
There you go. That's what you need to add.
Add it to your comment. You can comment with anything else. You can comment with any theory stuff. But just add it to the beginning or the end. Just say Edson likes pink panties, and you get a special shout out and a hug.
Yes. And obviously, because you've stayed this long, you guys know what the next series is. But ask us in the comments as well, like when it starts. We maybe we'll know by the time this video goes out.
Indeed.
But yeah, it'll be out soon.
Yes. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm gonna miss the forest a lot, but we're on to bigger and better things.
It's been a lot of fun, and we appreciate all of the support from episode 1 all the way through this episode 67.
So emotional. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this theory video.
Theory
video. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
I love your faces.
I love them more.
Whoa!